Hey everybody, I have a really special guest today. Oh, well, first of all, I want to welcome you again to the Vegan Good Life with Miyoko. And today I have a very special guest, someone that I admire and respect greatly, Dr. Breeze Harper, also known as Sister Vegan, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Oh yeah. I think that's what most people know me by most when they
Yes.
see me sometimes. It's Sister Vegan.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what is Sister Vegan? Like, what do you do to promote veganism and
Sure.
sisterhood and equity and justice and all that stuff?
Yeah, so Sister Vegan started 20 years. So 20
Okay.
years ago, that's the 20-year anniversary this year, 2024. Really understanding how being a Black woman in the United States really impacts how we eat our food, and especially if you practice veganism. So I've been doing this work to really make veganism more equitable and diverse, and really acknowledging the Black women and girls who've been engaged in veganism from cultural perspectives that are kind of informed by what it also means to be Black in the United States.
Okay,
Yeah.
and veganism is rising just exponentially in the Black community,
yeah.
is it not?
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
And why is that?
I think there's just this return to really understanding how to have more agency around our health, and really understanding that a lot of the industrial food has not really been good for the Black community, especially for.
Well,
Oh my gosh, for anyone, but
especially
for
the Black community,
yeah,
because that's what's accessible
Yeah.
in the Black community. Like, you don't see fresh food oftentimes in.
food deserts, food
That's right.
apartheid, you know. So, and a lot of the corporations really were targeting Black communities with junk food that you wouldn't see in, say, like more middle or upper class, largely white communities.
Yeah, no, I
Yeah.
mean, it's criminal. I mean, it really is, and it is an aggressive and purposeful attack on the Black community. It's sort of like the continuation of slavery in a way. It's like, let's keep these people
Yeah.
suppressed and oppressed with food that's going to make them sick.
Yep, and it's systemic. You know, we see that in the. I focus primarily on the food system and Black health and equity, but it's we see that not just with the food system, but the way Black people have been impacted by inequities in the political system, the education system, redlining. Lack of we have voter rights, but the inaccessibility of just doing what you need to thrive. And I feel like food apartheid, and I say apartheid from Karen Washington's work, not food deserts, because food deserts are naturally occurring ecosystems for the most part. Like, deserts are, but apartheid, it's orchestrated. It's intentional.
Yes,
it's orchestrated.
Yes, it's orchestrated.
Yeah, and so a lot of the work I've been doing with many other, mostly Black folk, a lot of Black women vegans. How do we use a plant-based diet, veganism, so we can decolonize our bodies? So a lot of us are trying to use food as wellness as we're trying to mitigate these stresses that often manifest as nutritional illnesses.
Well, okay. Well, I want to welcome you to my kitchen today.
Thank you. I'm excited.
And so we're going to be doing some cooking. We're going to be doing some talking. We're going to share a meal later on, because it's all about the vegan good life. And I'm really all about, how do we bring the good life to communities everywhere, to people everywhere. And one of the ways, I think, is celebrating very simple foods that we have been eating for centuries the world over, legumes and vegetables and whole grains. I mean, we weren't all eating, processed vegan burgers.
Nope.
I mean, and we don't need to. We can just go back to our roots. And so today, and actually for the next few episodes, I'm going to be focusing on something that is considered poor man's meat in Asia, and that's tofu. And I'm going to do it in several different ways, but we're going to try to elevate it so we can sort of not just, we were going to glamorize tofu, I guess, just sort of, but easy, simple way, so that people the world over can see, okay, eat these very simple foods that we've been eating for thousands of years, hundreds of years in different parts of the world, can have an application here today in a way that more people can enjoy. So we're going to make something out of my very first cookbook, the Now
That's
and
awesome.
Epic here. Okay,
Yeah.
this is actually the revised edition, but so we're going to make tofu bourguignon. So in other words, we're going to make like a beef burgundy stew, but we're going to make it with tofu. And today we're starting out with frozen tofu.
Ooh, I was going to ask about the texture.
Yes.
That's a little different.
Yep, so this is frozen tofu. As you can see, there's still some ice around it. It's kind of yellow. What happens when you freeze tofu is that the water comes out of the tofu, it freezes, and it creates these pockets.
Okay.
And so this one, I just pulled out of the freezer this morning just to show people that it gets dark like this. And as it thaws, it gets whiter. And this one I pulled out of the freezer last night.
Okay.
And so it's already, and I froze it and I thawed it, and now I can squeeze the water out of it.
That's
You
a good
see this?
hack. That is a really good hack.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that I don't just like willy-nilly squeeze it like that because I want it to stay together. So I want to squeeze it flat like this, and all that water is coming out of the tofu. So if you're going to make a dish with frozen tofu, it's best to just pull it out of the freezer the night before. If you've forgotten, you can just put this in a bowl of boiling water for 15-20 minutes. Just keep changing the boiling water until it thaws, and then you can do what I'm doing right now. Okay, we're going to take this tofu and we're going to marinate it in a wine bath. Ooh. That is going to actually go into the sauce eventually. So the first thing I'm going to do is I got a 1.25 cups of red wine here, and this is from a local winery that's completely vegan, McAvoy.
Oh,
so,
that's great.
Right. Okay, so then we're going to add to the wine 5 tablespoons of soy sauce, which is going to give it a little bit of salt, umami. And then this is mirin, which is Japanese sweet sauté, and I'm going to add about 5 tablespoons of sweet sake to that. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of... Can you just like pour, and I'll tell you when it's about 2 tablespoons. That's balsamic vinegar.
Okay.
That's probably good. Okay. That's good enough. And then I'm going to add miso. So about 2 tablespoons of miso.
Okay, like a miso soup type of miso? It's
miso soup type of miso, yeah. And you can use, the traditional made out of soybeans, or you can get chickpea miso if you're soy free. Well, you can't really do soy free because there's soy sauce in it too.
Okay.
But you could do tamari and make it gluten free.
Yeah, we use tamari at my house usually. Not because it's gluten free, but for some reason the kids enjoy that taste better than the soy.
That's interesting, because tamari actually only represents about 2% of soy sauce production in Japan.
Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to also just add a couple cloves of garlic.
Smash it.
Well, I usually use my garlic rock, but I don't know. Oh, here it is.
Okay.
There's my garlic rock. So that's what I usually use to smash my garlic.
Yeah, I was well into my adult life when I realized that you're not supposed to just take a minute or 10 minutes to kill each of the cloves, that you have to smash it.
Is that what you were?
I didn't know. I was like, this is so painful. I think I'm just gonna buy garlic powder.
Oh my
gosh!
Someone
introduced me to you have to smash it, Breeze. I'm like, okay.
All right, so I'm just gonna chop this up roughly. Chop it up. You can use a garlic press if you want. It doesn't matter. Yeah. Just want to get some of that lovely garlic flavor in here. And so what I'm doing is making this wonderful umami-rich marinade of wine with a little bit of sweetness from the mirin, heady aromas from the garlic. And now I'm going to cut this tofu, and I'm going to show you. There's some little pockets of where the water was. Can you see that?
Yeah.
And so you want to make sure that these are really, really dry. If it's already full of water, it's not going to absorb any marinade.
Makes sense.
So now we're going to let this sit for about 30 minutes. You can let it sit overnight if you like. You want the flavor to completely be absorbed into the tofu.
Oh, nice.
And then we're going to dunk it in some flour and saute it. And it's going to be incredible. You can use gluten-free flour if you like. It really doesn't matter. Alrighty. So we just fixed the sound. If it was funny, I apologize. So I wanted to show you, I had 2 different brands of tofu that I froze, and you'll find that every brand of tofu is slightly different. So this one here, as you can see, produced these giant pockets. You see that?
Yeah.
So it's going to be really, really spongy. It's going to absorb whatever you soak it in. So I'm just going to show you, what's been happening to some of these pieces here. So here's one. This one's already broken. So this one, it's been soaking. Take a look at it. Do you see that the marinade has gone into the middle? Yeah. Now, if this were fresh tofu, it would not absorb any marinade. But with frozen tofu, you can get that marinade to go right into the middle of it, just just exploding it with flavor, just filling it with flavor. So that's why frozen tofu is so good. It's also chewier, you're going to find.
Okay.
So now we're going to cook this. And I know you were saying that you cook the same old stuff all the time for your kids.
Yep.
So hopefully this will be a new dish to add to your repertoire.
They're definitely gonna love this.
Breeze, I'm going to put you to work, okay?
Okay.
So what you're going to do is you can take a piece of tofu and you're going to just squeeze it gently. Because you want the marinade in there, but you don't want it to be like overpoweringly whiny. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I mean, the kids are whiny,
Now,
right?
you just read my mind. I was
Yes.
like, I'm not going to say which of the four, but one of them is definitely a winner.
Okay, so but don't squeeze it completely dry like that. I'm going to redip it.
Okay.
Just squeeze it gently so you get a little bit out, but not a lot. Now you're going to put it in this bowl of flour.
And it's just sweet flour?
It's just regular old all-purpose flour, but you
Okay.
can use gluten-free flour. It really doesn't make any difference, okay?
Right. Okay.
Okay, we're going to put it into the skillet here.
And what type of oil do you use for this?
This is olive oil, but you can use avocado oil or whatever
Okay.
whatever you like. I wouldn't use coconut oil because you don't want it to have, that
taste.
coconut flavor.
Exactly.
I don't like it. Besides, it's really high in sat fat. Squeeze, dip, fry.
Awesome. I see
Okay.
that you're using the cast
Sauté.
iron pan because I think that's a healthy choice. Not everyone is used to it, but I think it's the health benefits of just cooking with materials that are not like Teflon are really important if we're going to make nutritious food.
I love this is my go-to pan. This is what I typically use. We're just going to cook this until it's super, super crispy on both sides. Yep, stick it in there.
And then-
That was the sound I was going
the
for.
sizzle, okay.
The sizzle is what I wanted, but I didn't have it hot enough initially.
Okay. And soy, it has so many benefits, tofu.
Can you talk about that?
oh,
Because
yes.
how many anti-tofu people
But
or
we're going
soy
to talk
people?
about that. So let's talk about
Let's talk about tofu.
Let's talk about
soy.
tofu. Let's talk about soy. Let's talk about when we learn about what's nutritious and not. You got to think about how things are marketed to the benefit of a Eurocentric culture and industry, right? And a lot of anti-Asian sentiment that comes out of let's not have food that's Asian food coming toward us.
You think that has a lot to do with it? I never thought about that. I
Yes.
thought it was just dairy. But you think there's a racist component as well?
Totally. The
Wow.
building of the identity around who's American, especially around normative whiteness, is really focused on foods that are connected to power and identity, and that being whatever is thought of as quote unquote American white food. Burgers that are based on cows, milk that comes from cows. So when those other people's food comes over, it's going to taint the way we are as human beings, and we ingest ideologies, right? So we're ingesting beef burgers and we're ingesting cow dairy as a way to show a proper whiteness and Americanness. So I think there's a lot of that xenophobia going around, even in 2024 when we hear about, isn't tofu going to cause this or that in terms of health ailments? And then one of the things that
we'll hold off on putting those in here.
Okay, it's really important to think about is where you're getting that information from. What is the agenda when you hear that certain foods that are not quote unquote Eurocentric are supposedly not healthy. Tofu is amazing. I love tofu and soy and variations of it. And especially if you're going through perimenopause or menopause, it's really important to have tofu in your diet.
Is it just tofu or can it be any kind of soy?
Yeah, any type of soy. So,
but is that it's natural soy or protein isolates also?
Not protein isolates. We're talking about, tofu that is created in a holistic way. We're talking about tempeh, which is even more healthy, I believe, because the fermentation process really helps the body to absorb certain minerals and vitamins. And this is really essential if you're female and you're perimenopausal, menopausal, pregnant, but especially menopausal age. This is excellent to help balance the hormones. And a lot of the issues a lot of people go through when they go through menopause can really be mitigated through vegan nutritional practices that have a lot of natural tofu products in it and tempeh products in it.
Wow.
Yeah,
okay.
and it's amazing. I feel a huge difference as someone who is the perimenopausal age, just incorporating freshly made and produced and cooked tofu like this and tempeh. Amazing.
Remember those studies came out about how soy was good for you and they were protective against cancer, and then all of a sudden, a couple of years later, these studies came out saying that soy contained these phytoestrogens that would give you cancer, and then everybody's like, oh, I can't have soy anymore. And it turned out that those studies were funded by the dairy industry.
That makes sense.
And I thought that was just it, but I never considered the racist component of it, and it makes so much sense that we would in this country, that also has a part. I mean, that's just really profound, I think.
Yeah, and it's there's just so many different ways to think about what we think is the ordinary and that we take for granted, how there have been people that want to maintain power around, who, will be in power in terms of race and class, ethnicity in this country. And unfortunately, they've used a lot of things like food and food culture as a tool.
Well, because you eat 3 times a day.
Yeah.
Food culture is basic. Food culture is so that's who we are. We are nothing. We can't live without food. And so what a great place to implant any kind of racism and control over a people.
Yeah, and then also, I'm thinking about that, and then also not necessarily connected, but when we think about control and agency, going back to, the power of natural soy and tofu and, tempeh products when it comes to like women's health, right? There's such under-researched focus on nutrition that can help us when we're pregnant, when we're going through perimenopause, menopause. Also, if you're having night sweats and hot flashes, you're low energy, if you're having problems, even if you're someone who's trying to gain muscle mass or not lose muscle mass, plant-based products like tofu, tempeh especially, and tofu organic is the best, will really help with that. And this is coming from someone who had 4 pregnancies, is almost 50, works out a lot and has not lost muscle mass, has energy, and has not been going through the perimenopausal or menopausal symptoms that a majority of my girlfriends really have. And the difference is, for the most part, that I can see, is that I have been a holistic vegan using tofu and tempeh for like 20 years now.
Yeah. We're ready to cook the vegetables, the mushrooms, the onions. So I just wiped out my sauté pan here, my cast iron pan, and I've got 1 diced onion that I'm throwing in here as soon as my oil is hot. This is I like sweet yellow onions.
Okay.
So this is a sweet onion. And, the sweetness really depends on how you cook it and how long you cook it as well, too. So I'm going to add the onions. I'm going to add a little pinch of salt.
Okay, salt.
Just to kind of flavor it. We're going to just let the onions wilt for a couple of minutes. Now, in the back here, I've got a pot of hot water, because we're going to serve the bourguignon with some pasta, some fettuccine. So I'm going to throw that in there, throw some salt in there, let that come to a boil, and we'll let this cook for a couple of minutes.
So what type of noodles are we going to be using?
We're just using some dry, these are just some, I think these are tagliatelle noodles.
Okay.
So while the onions are cooking, I'm going to be making a little bit of cashew cream that we're going to add to this. Now you could use soy milk if you like. The thing with a lot of soy milks commercially is that they have a lot of sugar in them. They're a little sweet, you know what I mean? It's hard to find just a plain soy milk.
Agreed.
Yes. So we're going to do this instead. You can make an almond milk. Almond milk would also work, but the store-bought kind is just too thin because they have 3 almonds in a quart of water or something like that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, actually.
So I just prefer to make my own. You could do your own homemade oat milk as well, but you just want to have more substance in it. So it's not just water with 3 cashews or a tablespoon of oats or something. So we're going to puree that. Okay, so I didn't tell you how much I added. I added about 2/3 cup of cashews to about 2 cups of water.
Okay.
This is when I get a little impatient. It's like, when are these onions going to be ready?
I do the same thing with onions as well. I'm like, there's got to be a faster way.
There's got to be well, there is a faster way. What you can do, if you really are in a hurry, is you put a lid over your onions. So you're kind of steam sautéing it, and it will cook it faster. So I could just go like this, and that will cook my onions a little bit faster. So I'm just stealing the lid from the pasta water because that's boiling now. And this whole dish, by the way, we're kind of done. We're just waiting for the onions to cook. It will be done in like 10 minutes. All right, so now I'm going to add the mushrooms. I've got about a pound of mushrooms here that I sliced. These are crimini mushrooms. Crimini, I don't know which it is. And we're going to saute this, and we want the juices to ooze out of these mushrooms because the juices are going to be part of the dish.
Okay.
So we're going to just saute these until the juices start to come out. And mushrooms are another poor man's meat or food that people have been eating. They've been gathering, and you can even cultivate mushrooms very easily for centuries. So, it's really interesting what you've been talking about in terms of how complex the food system is. As vegans, we often think about whether or not animals are impacted. And then if you're a plant-based person, maybe you don't care about animals, but you're thinking about, well, is my health impacted? But the fact is, the food system is much more complex than that. We have to think about all these other areas that the food system impacts. People in other countries, people of color, communities, whether or not they have access to food or not.
Exactly. And this has been the center of my work, graduate studies work, leading into my PhD work and then consulting work, really understanding that, food isn't just this mundane, ordinary object. Literally, food is a whole institution. It's a way of thought, and it's connected to political systems, economic systems, and unfortunately, in places like the United States, hierarchies of power and subordination. So, when I think about food and food justice in the food system, especially veganism, the center has always been about cruelty-free. But unfortunately, a lot of it has been limited to maybe focusing on only non-human animals and not the reality that the way we get a lot of our food, most of our food too, comes from human beings who are in an inequitable
Who are also
system.
suffering.
Yes, they're in an inequitable system. And, when I used to do my work about understanding what cruelty-free means, I was really concerned that people in the mainstream vegan community would be so excited about a particular maybe chocolate bar, right? That there's no cow dairy in this. Great, that is a great advancement. But did you know a majority of the world's cacao comes from enslaved child labor, and there was a lot of disconnect where a lot of vegans, and I did mostly notice that those in more privileged positions, racially and class-wise, didn't care when I brought up, hey, what about child enslavement? Or, when we're going to work in a place that, go to look at a place that we're manufacturing food, what does the workplace look like? Great, they might be a top vegan producing company, but what does the workplace look like, And if you're in a capitalist economy where it's really extractive and you're just focused on profit, history has shown us that you cut corners around quality of food and also you cut corners on how people are treated who make the food possible.
Okay, I'm going to interrupt for a second because we're ready to add the marinade. So we didn't just use the marinade to soak the tofu. We're going to add it to the dish to make the sauce
Oh my God, that looks
itself.
amazing.
Okay, and we're going to just let that come to a boil, and then we're going to add these. These are green peas that are fresh.
I was going to
They
ask.
take a little bit. I was able to get these. So if you're using frozen, they just take a couple of minutes. And then these are carrots that I cut up and I parboiled because I just want a little bit of that color, but I don't want them. This is only going to cook for a few minutes, about 10 minutes or so. So I parboiled it. And while this is now cooking, the pasta is going to take 10 minutes or so to cook. So I'm going to throw this in the back here.
Okay.
One.
They're like
Two.
little nests.
They are like little nests. Okay, and I got salt in there. And now we're ready to add the tofu. I just want to simmer it in the sauce for a little bit and reheat it. So we're going to add most of this, I think. I might have a little bit too much. Oh, yes.
That looks amazing.
Yes, it's going to be delicious. And we just want this whole thing to simmer for a few minutes. And then we're going to add the cashew cream at the very, very end. And that's going to thicken up this sauce. So we'll let that, doesn't that look good?
Amazing.
All right, so we're going to let that cook and let the flavors marry for about 5 minutes or so. And then we're going to add the cream. And then by then the pasta should be ready.
Okay.
And we're going to be ready to sit down and have a meal. This is looking beautiful. And now I'm just going to add a little bit of this cream that's going to go in there. Does that look delicious, doesn't it? And, oh yes, it's going to add a little bit of richness. The cream is going to thicken up because the cashews have a starch, and it's going to thicken up the sauce a little bit, make it a little creamier. Now, it's sort of a combination, I would say, a marriage of bourguignon and stroganoff, because you would typically not put cream of any sort into a bourguignon. But I mean, I do have an amazing bourguignon recipe that takes hours to make, but this is like a quickie weeknight thing. You know, you could throw this together in 30 minutes. I mean, if we weren't doing all this yakking, it would have been ready, right? But we are having a very important conversation and
adding that special social justice sauce to the mix.
That's right, right. It's not just the bourguignon sauce, it's the social justice sauce.
There you go.
All right, so I'm going to plate this up and we're going to go into the dining room where we are going to enjoy the vegan good life and we're going to talk about what that means. All right, well, buon appetito. I'm so glad that you're here and we're having this. I think it's amazingly important. And, you know, as vegans, we just are so focused on the binary equation of are there animals or not animals? And we don't think about the impact on people. And we can't survive if we don't think about that.
Exactly.
Do you think that veganism could perhaps be, because the fact that it's exploding in the Black community, is it possible that veganism could represent the diet of liberation? You know, considering if you go back to Africa prior to slavery, the large percentage of the African diet was plant-based.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It wasn't necessarily vegan, but it was, you know, veganism, you know, is a more newer term, but it was more plant-based, plant-centered. And I think this is why I was interested in getting an anthology together of Black women vegans and wondering, you know, why did they choose this dietary philosophy, this lifestyle philosophy?
And why do they? Why is it exploding?
From the mainstream, which was mostly mainstream white vegans were really not just, but their focus was more on non-human animal rights, which is cool. For the Black community, their focus is on, you know, how do we reclaim our body and our nutrition and our health? And it looks like, you know, we need to kind of go back to a more holistic plant-centered diet that we had before being, you know, part of this institution of chattel slavery starting 500 years ago. And just kind of the joy of understanding what nutritional liberation can look like that is not kind of connected to or you know, relying upon a corporate capitalist and, you know, food system and all of this packaged crap, but kind of this giving you a more sense of agency and hope and a resilience around your health. And that's what we're seeing in tandem with other ways of resisting systemic oppression that is found in the political system, educational system, that the food system, you know, it kind of parallels all of this work to kind of engage in Black liberation, and food should not be, you know, separate from all these other things. So that's what I'm saying. Okay.
Well, I mean, I'm really interested to know what are the differences in the Black community as it relates to veganism, as opposed to in the white community. I mean, the fact is, I find that Blacks are absent from most forms of vegan activism. If you go to vegan summits or conferences, how many Black people do you actually see? You see very, very few. They're very underrepresented, even though it's the largest group of vegans, I believe. And so why is that? I mean, I feel like there's racism within our own movement of some sort.
Well, those are really important questions, and, you know, and it's not that, you know, Black folk are not interested in this. A lot of conferences may not actually touch upon or focus on the realities in the Black community and what is, you know, important for us for survival. So a lot of these conferences that I'll look at that talk about animal rights and veganism that are mainstream, they're not talking about anything else except non-human animal rights. They're not talking about, you know, how, say, anti-Black racism, other forms of racial injustice are impeding and impacting human beings that also eat, you know, use their money to buy food, would like to actually figure out ways to be more healthy. So I think when I look at these conferences, I'm often not interested because I'll see that they're not having these conversations that are intersectional. You know, it's very siloed in their thinking. So I'm less likely to go somewhere to a conference where they're not also talking about implications of loss of farmland amongst Black farmers, the implications of food apartheid.
Well, Black farmers, I mean, there used to be so many.
Yeah,
there are almost none anymore.
Yeah, they've lost about 90% of their farmland through engineered policies and practices from the government, and also a lot of white landowners who don't want Black people to have access to land. You know, I mean, there's Liberation Farms in New York. They're the largest vegan permaculture farm, Black owned, Black steward, and they struggled to also, you know, have that land. You know, they went through a lot that I know was basically impacted. You know, their struggle to just have this farmland was impacted because of anti-Black racism. And what they do with that land is that they're creating healthy vegan options, and then they bring it, you know, to Brooklyn and other parts of New York City to the Black community. And that's liberation, right? Versus having limited access to these foods because you don't have transportation to get out to a farm, that you don't have the income, that the Black liberation framework of liberation farms is amazing, where they're not just looking at, they're focused on animal rights and veganism, but also, you know, understanding the prison industrial complex, understanding the impact of redlining, racial profiling. So those are the conferences that I would be interested in going to.
Well, I'm thinking like maybe we need a different kind of conference that doesn't just talk about exploitation of animals, but exploitation of people, like a really holistic conference that talks about what is a truly ethical food system that considers the impact on not just animals, but people. And, you know, no one's having that. And maybe that's a new one that we need to create, because there are more racially focused conferences, but they're not oftentimes thinking about animals.
No, they're not.
And so you've got, you know, one or the other. And I think what we need is a really holistic, comprehensive conference. Maybe that's something that we can do.
That would be awesome, because there's smaller ones, but they're not gaining momentum. They're not getting sponsored and funded, because a lot of times organizations are going to fund conferences that don't get too political.
Well, not only that, but that's exactly right, because people are political. Animals are not as political, although they are. They're political in the sense that corporations don't want to lose money. But if people knew what was being done to people in the food system, they would, you know, the average person would be even more outraged.
When we're talking about conferences, I went to the Black Veg Fest in Brooklyn, which Omawale, he was the editor for Brother Vegan. He and his partner Nadia and a lot of other folk in that organization, they have the Black Veg Fest every year, and that's at a conference in Brooklyn. They take the food from Liberation Farm, and they have a kiosk they're selling, and they have all these other kiosks that talk about liberation through not just food. They also talk about non-human animals rights. They talk about, you know, housing rights, everything that's affecting Black folks. So you're at this vegan conference where you're understanding how nutrition and food play in this, animal rights, but also all of the other systemic inequities that have deeply impacted Black folk. And the way it works, when you organize and you create better equity for the Black community, it creates equity for all other communities. And that's the focus, is understanding that. And that's what I see so pivotal, not just the Black vegan organizing community, but traditionally over the decades of organizing, when Black folk have asked for advancements, they knew it wasn't just for themselves. It would positively impact the equity and liberation of all other people.
Well, we're talking about a lot of things, but how's the food?
It's delicious. It's amazing. I don't want it to end, so I'm just like taking my time. Okay. And it's just I can't say enough about just freshly created homemade meals.
Which is what I think that's where liberation happens. Like, if we can all take control again of our food in our own kitchens, we're less dependent on corporations to feed us. So it's a decentralization of power and taking power back into ourselves, which is why I believe cooking is so important. Less reliance on packaged goods. Creating things from scratch. I mean, yes, I did buy these noodles, but oftentimes I make my own pasta. Yeah. So, there's limits, but as much as possible, getting back in your kitchen and cooking is one of the best things. And there'll always be things you're going to buy, and that's okay.
Because we don't live in a binary world that we either do or do not buy certain things. But I think it's really important. It's a gorgeous learning experience, especially if you're teaching in a way where you're bringing in culinary traditions, which is, for the Black vegan communities, that they're bringing in their cultural foods and then adding that vegan spin to it. And then we talk about these things.
Right.
We talk about the meaning behind it, why it's important. Let's talk about the history of okra, okra seeds that many enslaved Africans, unfortunately, when they were abducted, many of them knew they weren't going to return to their homeland, most likely. So they weaved pods and seeds like okra seeds in their hair during a long journey across the Atlantic.
And that's how we brought okra here.
So many of...
Because it's an African plant, right?
Yeah, so many of people's, traditional foods were interwoven into their hair. And pods, and that's an amazing story to have those connections when we're talking about that, but also just the sacredness of certain greens, and how they go back centuries as these culinary practices that were part of certain tribes that were disenfranchised, dispossessed because of chattel slavery. And I think that's beautiful to have communities where we have these dinners and we talk about the power of those foods, those food systems, and it gives you a kind of, I don't know, a way of knowing and being that connects you as a human being in your culture, and these foods that you're putting into your body to thrive. And I think that's beautiful.
All right, so let me ask you one question, and before we close today. So, for people of color, for Black communities, what would the vegan good life look like?
Okay. So, I can probably speak from not just my own experience, but a lot of the work I've been doing and talking about these issues with Black communities throughout the United States, at least, is basically being able to, just be food secure, to be able to have access to farming or land, not necessarily, land directly, but some folk are learning ways to cook, raise their vegetables and plants, in cities and urban farming systems that are collective and in collaboration. I think about talking to DJ Kavum, who's out in Denver, hip-hop vegan gardener. And the Vegan Good Life is, teaching youths that cultivating your food and knowing where it comes from is cool. That's awesome.
It's cool.
And then, thinking about Brenda Sanders out in Baltimore, the Vegan Good Life is being able to put a festival together that's focused on, veganism and, Black soul foods and traditions. That's an awesome Vegan Good Life.
Do you know Keith Tucker of Hip Hop is Green?
Hip Hop is Green. The Vegan Good Life is, being able to use the magic of the educational models of hip hop to get youths really excited and engaged in how plant-based diets are an awesome way of liberation and also connected to environmental justice and climate change activism. So the Vegan Good Life also would be just being able to exist in America as a Black person and not having to endure racial bias, that would be great, because cruelty-free, great. That's great that we can have access to cruelty-free vegan products when we can, but it wouldn't be great to have a cruelty-free life of, not having to...
For everyone.
Having to be part of, not part of, but have to endure just systemic biases, whether it's, racism, sexism, classism, they're all intersected. That would be, the Vegan Good Life, to be able to exist...
and enjoy life.
And enjoy life and not have to worry about, being discriminated against because of, your racial, background or any
or discriminated against through food.
Yeah.
That was something that we've talked about. Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's, that's the Vegan Good Life is, it's so many different things, not just with eating, but, just having this liberated way of being in across all systems,
All right. Well, everyone, today I have had the pleasure of having Breeze Harper, Dr. Breeze Harper, Sista Vegan, in my kitchen as we cooked tofu bourguignon together and chatted about ethics, about justice, about equity. These are very, very important topics that I really want people to think about. It's not just about animals. We have to also consider our people, because that's what this planet consists of, animals and people. So thanks for joining us today. Be sure to like and subscribe. And how can people find out about you?
Probably the best way is to go to Instagram to follow me. My handle is Sesta Vegan, S is in Sam, I, S is in Sam, T is in Tom, A, H is in Harry, vegan. That's my Instagram handle. And then you can go to abreezeharper.com, which is my page. It shows you the events I'm doing, the books I've written, just things that I'm super excited about in terms of intersections of veganism and environmental justice and racial justice. So.
All right. Well, it's been such a pleasure to have you
I had
here.
an awesome time.
Yeah.
This is awesome.
All right.
Do it again. Maybe we can do it over dessert next.
Yeah, we can do it over dessert.
That
Good
sounds
idea.
good.
Okay. All right, everybody. See you again next week.